This compelling, faith-filled story tells of the planting of the Episcopal Church on Sanibel Island and of its nurture and growth through the year 1999. It is based upon surviving records and the recollections of people available to give living witness in 2013. Before the causeway opened in 1963, Sanibel Island was accessible only by water and air.
I mean, Sanibel was a primitive, faraway place. It was a long way and a hard road to get to the mainland. I mean, we had the ferry boat, and then still it was a long distance.
Episcopalians, both permanent and seasonal residents, had welcomed priests who occasionally came over by ferry to hold services in private homes.
Well, my family's always had connections with the church. In fact, while I was born, in the early part of the century, my house had bishops and clergymen all over the place.
Only the community church held public worship services on Sanibel Island, and then only during the winter season. Captiva's Chapel by the Sea was a winter chapel as well. Several Episcopalians yearned for public worship according to the Anglican tradition, including celebration of the Eucharist. In early 1958, a group of them approached Father Arthur Smith, then rector of St. Luke's Episcopal Church, Fort Myers, to urge the formation of a mission on Sanibel Island. Father Smith took a ferry to Sanibel to meet with the group. His assistant, 53-year-old Father Thomas Andrew Madden, a Scottish-born priest on leave from the Diocese of Milwaukee, came along for the ride. Father Smith's response was positive, and within weeks, Father Madden celebrated the first public Episcopal service of Holy Communion on Sanibel Island. Father Madden, as vicar of St. Michael's Episcopal Mission, held Wednesday morning worship services for several months at the community church.
My Aunt Betty, my mother's older sister, was in the restaurant business here on Sanibel. My mother was of the original parishioners that, together with Father Madden, established church services on Sanibel at the Casa Marina restaurant down by the old ferry landing.
Father Madden arranged to use Casa Marina, no longer a restaurant, to house St. Michael's Episcopal Mission Church. Church music was first supplied from vinyl phonograph records, and later from a pump organ obtained for $15.
Well, that's where we held our first services. The exterior door had a little diamond-shaped window in it.
Before Father Madden arrived, the island's people of color had no place of worship, so he invited them to attend the mission.
He usually did two services, one for the white parishioner, then he would do one for the black parishioner. Not in the same building because the logistics, the church service that he would perform were held at the black school or the school for colored children. And that's where we would meet and hold our service.
And then during Donna, the prayer books and hymns got all damaged and damp.
After Hurricane Donna, Sunday services were held at the restaurant run by Evelyn Pearson and Betty Sears. It was called the Nutmeg House. Father Madden led the vestry in raising and borrowing money to purchase land to build a church on Periwinkle Way. A prominent St. Louis architect, Gustav Hewitt, was a seasonal visitor to Sanibel. Following a chance encounter with a member of St. Michael's Mission Church, Hewitt enthusiastically agreed to design a church building. He adapted plans for a barn that he had designed for a family in St. Louis. It is now a showpiece in a park there. Hewitt had refined a structural design called lamella that originated in Germany. Lamella roof structures require no internal columns for support, thus allowing huge domed arenas to be free of internal obstructions.
We got a church up there, a structural church, not just a church in name, but the bricks and mortar type. Father Madden was the ramrod. If it were not for him, we wouldn't have had it. No one man can do everything, but he named it. You might as well say he built it, both structurally and the church itself.
Father Madden, who had been ordained on the feast of the day of St. Michael the Archangel, selected St. Michael and all angels as the church's name. The first service was held in the new church building on February 26, 1961. There was still work left to be done, but it was a joyous gathering. The completed church building was dedicated on January 14, 1962, by the Bishop of South Florida.
I think the church became successful right away. It was one of those places that there was a need for it. The church absolutely was something that fell into place.
I remember coming to church as early as I can remember any memories here on Sanibel because of my mother's involvement in the church. And I remember getting dressed up in the same outfit that my brother Kim wore. We matched, and my mother would be dressed up and we would leave for church. And being the largest church at the time on Sanibel, almost all the children of Sanibel that did go to church came here. And every church service on Sunday, he would bring all the children in to bless the children. We would all retreat in the middle of the service to Sunday school for half hour, 45 minutes, and then right towards the end of the service, he would bring all the children in and bring us right up to the altar. And Father Madden, in a very casual way, would address us kids and give his blessing. It was really pretty wonderful.
Father Madden's liturgical style in celebrating the Eucharist was Anglo-Catholic, sometimes referred to as High Church.
I remember the smell of the incense that Father Madden burned in church. It was kind of a piney fragrance, but I remember that because you never smelled that anywhere else.
It was a much more formal service than it is now. And I always loved his diction.
Father Madden soon became well known all over the island, often visiting strangers and inviting them to attend. His warm yet persisting manner, along with the difficulties of traveling to the mainland, prompted people of many denominations to attend St. Michael's.
Father Madden approached me and my family and said, I would like for you and your children to come to St. Michael's. And would you come? And I said, and James said, sure, we'll be there. You couldn't say no to Father Madden. He was that kind of a man. You just didn't know how to say no. He was a wonderful man. He really was. He loved you, and it came from his heart. And he loved your children. Wasn't nothing too good for you or your children. You know, you came up here and you worked on the Saturday. He didn't hire anybody to come do the yard work.
You just didn't come to church, particularly just for service, but you had a bigger obligation to do whatever you could on your spare time. That just sort of caught on with everybody. So all the kids wanted to come to church.
Each family took the turn on a Saturday. I was inside the church cleaning, and James and the boys was outside doing the yard. And after the church was done, he would load the children up in the car, my 3 boys, and then he went around and picked up other children and would take them into Fort Myers to the Dairy Queen. This is the kind of man he was. He loved those children. He really did.
He'd take us to the movies and take us to outings, to areas that we hadn't been before. And he would take us down to Bonita Springs. We had a summer camp in Avon Park each year, and he saw to it that, you know, any kid that wanted to go to camp for the summer, they were able to go.
He made them part of the church. They sang in the choir, they work on the altar.
Father Madden did make us all feel very important, and he felt that it was important that we be in church on Sunday too, and he had a memory that was phenomenal. And though it seemed like there were a legion of kids on the island, there were only 12 or 14 of us, maybe more. The Gavin family probably was 15 at least. Whenever you ran into Father Madden on the island outside of church, he always remembered if you were in church. And if you missed a Sunday, he would always ask you, where were you last Sunday?
You never argued with Father Madden because you knew he had it right.
It was a wonderfully happy place to be. And we were aware that a handful of the children in our community had a different skin color. Many of my African American friends had to go to a segregated school. But you weren't as conscious of it here on Sanibel.
We were a small community of several hundred folks. We really did not have separate neighborhoods.
Sanibel was a very comfortable place for everybody.
Well, we used to play with the colored kids. I grew up playing with them. Only thing was they were segregated, went home at night.
Father Madden sometimes took black children off island for recreation. He seemed able to diffuse any racial tensions with merchants.
You know, we didn't notice any difference because I think he always was there. And the fact that he was a priest opened some doors. He was not one to bite his tongue.
Although the island's intimacy and relative isolation encouraged racial tolerance, serious issues remained, and the pressure for resolution was mounting. Black families could not buy property on Sanibel. St. Michael's Church had racially segregated worship services and Sunday schools. Black school children had to ride an all-black ferry and bus to attend their Fort Myers schools.
Mr. Winterbottom is the man who started that, black people having property on Sanibel. And if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have owned property on Sanibel.
Father Madden, who had a deep sense of social justice, was determined to integrate the new church.
And then once the church was constructed, had its ribbon cutting, that, the parishioners were all going to be at one church at the same time.
On September 29, 1962, St. Michael's Day, the church services and church schools were integrated. Membership dropped initially, but over time, attendance grew to new heights.
I think we were probably one of the first churches that had interracial congregations at the time.
I do remember feathers were ruffled over that. And several people resigned from the church because of it too. Quite a number that quit going to the church.
Some that left and never came back. I think in his mind, he made a commitment that we were all God's children. If we could all live on the same island, why couldn't we all worship under the same roof? It was the right thing to do.
Father Madden's report to the church's 1963 annual meeting did not mince words. He said in part,
"It is obvious to all of us that there are many in our community and in our particular church family who have given little more than lip service to their confirmation vows. May God give them a better understanding of His will. There are others who have alienated themselves from God's family for reasons we know and believe to be inconsistent with the teachings of Christ. To have completely closed our eyes and our minds and hearts to the challenge would have been a simpler and an easier way, but it would have been a denial of all Christ taught and died for. There can be no choice for the Christian but the right one, even though it be the hard way. And there are those who remain with us, faithfully and quietly doing the work of the Lord without stint of time, talent, and treasure. May they experience the joy of hearing, 'Well done, thou good and faithful servant.'"
Father Madden continued to work for social justice by strongly supporting, along with several parishioners, the drive to integrate the Sanibel School. When construction of the new school was completed in January 1964, children of all races were admitted.
Anytime you see a person that stand behind what they believe, regardless of what the rest of the world is saying, I think that was the one thing that inspired me about it, was he walked the walk as well.
Father Thomas Andrew Madden retired in 1971 after 11 years of service on Sanibel Island to God and the island's people. He had been instrumental in establishing the island's Episcopal mission, planning and completing an architecturally significant church building, effecting its racial integration, and caring deeply for his flock. He continued to live on the island, leading a prayer group, ministering to individual families, and working in animal rescue. The bishop of the recently created Diocese of Southwest Florida selected Father James Hubbs to be the next vicar of St. Michael and All Angels Church.
Father Hubbs was so wonderful. He was such a wonderful spiritual leader. By the time I got here and Father Hubbs was the priest, there was still a pretty good-sized Sunday school, but there was no junior choir anymore. He got church started into Cursillo. Some of the members of the church started going, and he went, and he loved it.
He was very loving. People here said that changed his ministry. He was more open to God's Holy Spirit. He was freer to preach the word, and he just seemed closer to God after that. He brought the St. Francis prayer home from Cursillo. When we sang it, knowing it's a prayer, he would always kneel down in front of the altar.
Father Hubbs was here when I was going back and forth. You couldn't have wanted a better priest anywhere as far as the rapport with the parishioners. He remembered everybody's name that went to the altar.
Father Hubbs served as vicar for 3 years. In 1974, the mission gained parish status by proving itself to be financially self-supporting, thus making Father Hubbs a rector. As a parish, St. Michael's Church enjoyed increased participation in diocesan affairs and the right to call future rectors. Father James Hubbs retired in 1985 after 14 years of service. The vestry organized a search committee for a new rector.
I was on the search committee to help find Father Dodd, and that was very exciting and wonderful and fun.
One of the candidates, the Reverend William P. Dodd, had previously visited the church with his wife Peggy while visiting his mother on Fort Myers Beach.
Bill's dad died down in Fort Myers Beach, and his mother asked us to come down, and we did. And she said, there's this cute little church out on Sanibel. I want to take you there on Sunday. You'll just love it. It's darling. We came out, and lo and behold, here was St. Michael and All Angels. The people were wonderful to us, and we felt so welcomed. After the service, we had coffee hour out on the front lawn because there was no parish hall.
Father Dodd submitted his credentials to the search committee, and after interviews and other steps, he was called as rector.
Father Bill came, and when he came, by that time, my little granddaughter, Tina, came to live with James and I. I started bringing Tina to church. Tina one Sunday, and she would pass the plate, you know. One Sunday she said to someone they didn't have anything, and she said, don't forget, you owe Jesus some money. But there were other kids coming to Sunday school when Father Bill was there. And he did a really good job with those children. And Judy Workman did too.
Father Bill led the people of St. Michael's to an expanded building.
Father Dodd spearheaded the establishment of Community Housing and Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization partnering with the city of Sanibel to provide affordable housing for families and individuals who qualify.
And he got all the people working for the housing. I just loved him. He was just wonderful. Father Bill started the memorial garden. Father Bill brought the computer in. He was a very, very efficient person.
Father William P. Dodd contracted a fatal cancer. He retired as the last rector of the 20th century in 1999, after 13 years of faithful service on Sanibel, to God, the parish of St. Michael and All Angels, and the community. His ashes rest in the columbarium of the Memorial Garden. From the very beginning, women of the Altar Guild, working quietly behind the scenes, cared for linens and silver, then carefully prepared the altar before and after each service.
There was a choir directed by my Aunt Betty Sears. We practiced every Thursday afternoon. It was not an option in my family. I was expected to be in the choir.
Father Hubbs hired Dorothy Bunk in 1984 as organist and choir director.
There was very little room for choir. There was a pipe organ up there. We were really cramped, and to get up there was kind of an ordeal too. Narrow, circular stairway on each side. There were no good lights in the parish hall, so we grouped ourselves pretty close to the kitchen, and we could turn the kitchen lights on, and that provided a little more light. The choir was very good. We sang a cappella, whatever needed to be done.
There were a lot of preparation and decoration going on for Palm Sundays. We would actually go out with our fathers and cut palm fronds that would then be brought back to the church, and the ladies would then make the crosses for Palm Sunday, decorating the church for Christmas, and we had all this preparation and anticipation of what was coming.
I remember Easter's and Christmas though. Easter we'd always have Easter egg hunts, and back then I think we used to even wear lace in our hair or hats and gloves.
Worship services were added as the congregation grew.
There was an 8 and a 9:30 and an 11. So over the course of the weekend, he did 4 services.
The second and fourth Sundays at 9:30 were morning prayer, not Holy Communion.
A lot of people went because they liked the guitar and they liked singing along to the guitar, but that was generally the 5 o'clock service.
The church's nave, as originally built, seated 70 people. As the parish grew, the worship space was enlarged and enhanced, but the original architectural values were maintained.
The church was different from what it is now because the red doors faced periwinkle. And where the columbarium is and the memorial garden is now, that was just the coffee hour.
When the nave of the church was extended by 20 feet, that meant that the balcony had to be extended, and it had to be structurally sound and engineered correctly, and then determine what space would be allotted to the pipe organ.
A new pipe organ was installed in the expanded nave, but it had acoustical shortcomings. As the 20th century was closing, an organ consultant had been hired to examine new approaches. Stained glass windows were created by local artisans.
The original ones, I think, were by Frida Ayurka, but then when they enlarged the church, we needed more windows, and there were some suggestions done by parishioners, and then Tom and Joan Callagher, who had a stained glass studio in North Fort Myers, were commissioned to do them. Joan herself designed the angel window, and then that choir tower was built.
For some of the Easter services, they had seating out on the porch. Then that was closed off, and a side entrance was there.
And I remember this cottage when we took our confirmation classes, and we would come here.
The parish hall didn't exist as we know it today. There was like a wing that was a parish hall, and then there was behind it another wing that was the offices. And I think the Sunday school was in there too at that time. There was no Noah's Ark building. There was no office building. They built what is now the offices as Noah's Ark. They just needed more space again. So they built that larger building in the back. What is now the office building became the choir room and the Sunday school room.
The cottage was the vicar's residence until Father Dodd was called. Breaking bread together has always promoted fellowship and provided an opportunity to reach out to the wider community. Potluck suppers, luncheons, and fundraising suppers were well attended.
The kitchen was very, very old and had a great big gas stove. The gas tank was out behind the church, and because of the concern of fire, Father Dodd always made sure that it was turned off from the outside. Everybody would want Father Dodd to taste their food. But I do remember the shrimp dinners that Peg put on, and they raised quite a bit of money. They had, I think it was Peggy's Pies. It was very successful. People loved it.
Women of the church, later the Episcopal Churchwomen, or ECW, were active in fundraising through sales from a thrift shop started in 1963. Edna Kearns and Elise Fuller sold donated clothes on the porch of a former hotel. In February 1968, the St. Michael's Church thrift shop, named Noah's Ark, opened its doors in a new building on church property. At first, 8 volunteers kept it open on Thursday afternoons and evenings, and it generated about $70 per day in sales. A larger building was completed in 1990, and it was doubled in size by 1999. An annual fashion show began in 1966 and continued to be very popular.
And of course we all wore each other's clothes, and you could see sport coat going up the aisle that your husband had had. And the shoes always had the dollar sign on them, like this on the bottom. So when people would kneel down for communion, you could always look up and see where the shoes came from. There were 3 ladies that sort of ran the ark. They didn't sort of, they ran the ark. And they invited me to be on the board of Noah's Ark. However, we never had a board meeting, not once. And I realized that I was just a token because I was only 45 at the time. But they continued to run the ark in their own way, you know. However, they worked hard.
When Father Madden was vicar, he would arrange to take clothing from Noah's Ark for needy people.
If people couldn't buy clothes and things, like for instance when school opened, he would just, if there were clothes in there for children, he would just get the clothes out and put them in boxes and bags and put them in his car and take them over to Harlem Heights and just give them away.
By the 1990s, Noah's Ark had become for many an island institution.
I was just absolutely amazed at how much the Ark earned, what wonderful things we could do with it, and I was very much taken with the idea of getting involved. And it didn't take long to get very involved. People are very, very supportive in giving us their donations. We have customers who come every single day. We expect to see them. If they don't show up, we're concerned. We really are.
As with many St. Michael's ministries, the Ark workers find emotional support and new friendships.
It's good therapy. Very good therapy.
Noah's Ark continues to serve the community by supporting many charities near and far, and by the sale of used goods for others' use.
It was also a sense of family, those activities that bring people together, you know, on a one-to-one basis. And I think that fellowship is as equally as important as the services that are held on Sundays.
It was just a feeling of a small family, really, at first. And even though some people left during the summer, this little small basic group kept things going.
My time at this church, what it taught me was having a true personal relationship with God. Whether you worship in any particular church, building, or otherwise. But it was such a positive experience. There was such unity in the community and unity in the parish, and all of us children, just about every child that I knew on the island belonged to this church. So that cohesiveness is stuck with me, and I have a fond, good feeling every time I drive by this church.
I always found the church welcoming, and I felt at home the first time I came.
I kind of grew up in the church. We spent a lot of time. All my memories are tied with the church.
I believe the heart of the community of Sanibel grew out of this church.